Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to Roots Refuge Farm. I just pulled down here to my garden and I'm getting ready to do a little bit of harvesting. I'm going to be working in the kitchen probably for the rest of today. And so I'm grabbing a bunch of stuff at once. I actually don't harvest a lot of things at one time often anymore. I used to do that. Would come out in the morning and just harvest everything in the garden that was ready, but I've found what I prefer to do actually is to come out, get all of something, go in and process it, and then do the same with the next thing. The reason for that is, you know, I got a lot of kids, I have a farm, we have other commitments, and you can get sidetracked. And so if I harvest something thinking I've got time to process it, and then I don't end up having time to process it, things can go bad or end up having to give them to the pigs or kind of do a less ideal way of processing, like throwing things in the freezer instead of canning or whatever. But today I know that I have time the next couple of days to get done when I need to get done, so I'm just going to pick a lot of stuff at once. Alright, so I'm just going to grab a couple of baskets out of the greenhouse. So there are ideal times to do anything in gardening. Just like if you look up gardening and say when is the best time to plant or to harvest or to water or to fertilize, and there's an ideal time for all of those things. Now there are certain things that you can actually do damage by doing them at the wrong time. For instance, like let's say you're going to put neem oil in your garden for pest control. If you do that in the middle of the hot summer day, you very well may scald your plants. So there are occasionally things that you want to avoid as far as timing. When it comes to harvesting, the ideal time to harvest anything that you want a higher water content, think your cucumbers, your greens, your green beans, anything like that, root vegetables, anything that you're wanting crunchiness or crispness, you want to harvest those things before the sun is up and hot for the day. So early in the morning, you're going to get the highest water content. Anything that you want a lower water content, so think things that are going to get sweeter or more flavorful as the sugars concentrate more because there's less water. You want to harvest those in the heat of the afternoon. So you're going to get a more intense flavor from melons and peppers and tomatoes by harvesting them in the afternoon. Anything you harvest, you can soak it in cool water for about 20 minutes afterwards and help reconstitute some of the water content. This was something that, like, I had an old man in line at a store once tell me, oh, you soak the heat off of it, which is to essentially just help it rehydrate. So if you have any sort of root vegetables or anything like that, that you've harvested cucumbers and they got kind of rubbery real quick, soaking them right after harvesting is how you avoid that. So the best time to harvest the things that I'm harvesting today would have been this morning. That would have been ideal, first thing this morning. However, I was with my kids first thing this morning. I decided to cook some breakfast, and then I had some other things in the barn. I had some like work stuff I had to do. So now it's like late morning, the sun's up, it's already hot. This isn't the ideal time, but though there is the most ideal, the best time to do things, typically the second best time to do things is when you actually have time to do it. And one thing that you can totally trip yourself up in the garden is because you can't do the most ideal, you end up not doing it at all, and then you end up with food that's inedible because you didn't harvest it in time. So I'm harvesting today later than I would like, but today's the day that I actually have time to process this stuff, so we're gonna get it out of the garden. So over here I've got my silver slicer cucumbers. They're going up, they're going down, they're everywhere. There are lots of cucumbers in here. I'm just gonna set the camera down, get into these vines and see what I find. I see a couple in there that have gotten pretty big. I've got them on this side also. Alright, here's my harvest. At least, I don't know, 4 or 5 pounds maybe worth of cucumbers. Pretty good little harvest. This variety is called Silver Slicer. I got the seeds from Hudson Valley Seed Company. I met the owner of that company, Kay, out at Baker Creek's Seed Expo in 2018, so it's been a good long while. And this was one of the top recommended seeds for their company, and I love it. This is my favorite cucumber. I actually didn't even grow any green cucumbers this year. I may put some down in the high tunnel, but I grew these off of seeds I saved last year from our garden, well, from Will's garden. My cucumbers didn't do well last year. I had a really bad time with pill bugs eating down my seedlings, but looks like this year's gonna make up for it. This cucumber is amazing because even when it gets big, like this one was hiding down in the bottom, it's still really good. Now it's more of like a garden, like a salad slicer at this point, but when you harvest them small like this, they're very crisp and great for pickles, but they don't get bitter. You know, cucumbers can have that really bitter flavor in the skin when it starts getting hot. Well, it can get over 90 Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius very regularly here by like May. So cucumbers can be kind of difficult because obviously they can't freeze. So I have a very short window to get them going and then harvest them before the fruit's no good. Oh, I see a couple that I missed down here at the bottom. And the Silver Slicer's been great for that because it can handle the heat, which is hilarious that I learned about this because it was raved about by a New York seed company because they're not dealing with the same conditions as me. But I have learned that things can work great in more than one place. Now, I don't know if this makes any difference at all, but I use scissors typically when I harvest cucumbers, and I try to leave a little tail on them here because I am gonna soak these before I can them, just to make sure that their water content is high and that they're good and crisp and crunchy. Typically I'll soak them even if I'm just gonna put them in the refrigerator to eat on for the next few days, and I have no idea if it makes a difference, but I like leaving the little tail on when I soak them, because I imagine it's like a straw and it helps them soak up water. I don't know, that makes sense, right? Alright, now I've got a whole lot of squash to harvest. Now my way of growing squash is that I just succession sow it. So these plants are actually getting a little on the bigger side. I mean, look how long this plant is. Now you can stake these up. I've never bothered much with it since usually my squash get killed really quick. This year I grew all hybrid varieties to hopefully get more harvest before the bugs became too much of an issue. I've already had to pull out a couple of plants that have wilted and died. Now I usually just succession sow, so here's my next go of squash, and then I've got some smaller ones back there. So I should be harvesting from these for a while, and then kind of when they succumb, the other ones will pick up. Oh, look at this rogue little melon. Let's go back up on the trellis, little dude. So I haven't really preserved any squash yet this year. I've primarily just been picking it, and we've been cooking it since it started, which has been 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we've eaten squash at least a handful of times a week. But I did let a few of these get really big, and a lot of times what I'll do with them once they're big is that I'll put them through my food processor, and then I'll freeze them in like freezer bags with like 1 cup per freezer bag. Essentially go ahead and measure out what I need to make like zucchini bread and stuff, and I put it in the freezer. In my experience, frozen squash really doesn't hold its texture to be very good for how I like to eat it. Like, I'm not going to take it out of the freezer and saute it. It's just really mushy at that point, but it's great for baking with. Or you can kind of like put casseroles together and freeze those, and then like squash casseroles, and bring them out. But yeah, I've got a lot to pick today. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do with it. I just want to get it off the plant because it's getting huge. I think I may make some ratatouille for dinner tonight with this squash, which I guess technically ratatouille use zucchini also, but I pretty much use yellow squash and dark green zucchini pretty interchangeably. These are a squash, which I can't even remember what they called this one. I don't know if they called it zucchini or what, but it's all more or less the same thing. Now I have a whole bunch of these little eggplants to pick. I did find a recipe for pickling these that I thought would be really cool. Of course, I've roasted some already, but I'm just gonna pick all of the small ones. Some of these are starting to get a little lighter, which means they're really ready. This is what they look like when they're smaller. And I mean, you could pick these even this small. I just want to get them all off the plant because I don't want the plant to stop setting flowers because it thinks it's done its job in making seeds. Very nice. Nice haul. So I have a lot of really large eggplants on here. Not so large that I'm worried about them going bad, but definitely large enough to pick. Just like a classic variety Black Beauty. But I am waiting on those because the smaller ones like are kind of more on the brink of like really needing to be picked. So I'm going to process those first. I'm just going to leave these on the plant. I don't have a ton of refrigerator space, and you know, it's just better to leave things on the plant if you can't refrigerate them, if it's going to be a day or two before you can process it. Alright, so I have one more thing. I've got more space in this basket, so I'm going to take it. Actually, I'm going to move a few of these cucumbers over to make even more space. So I have basil growing all over my garden. It's such a versatile plant. I love it. I love all different varieties of basil. I did a video recently here on Roots and Refuge kind of talking about basil growing tips. And then I also did a video on the farmer's table showing basil tea. But I am actually going to harvest and cut down my basil a lot right now because a lot of it's kind of starting to try to go to seed. And I'm just going to fill my freeze dryer up and freeze dry an entire batch of it that I'll use as like crumbled dry basil, you know, throughout the year. So when I cut stuff like this, I'm pretty aggressive in cutting it. I mean, I'm going to cut pretty much the top half of all of these plants. I do cut it right above where it splits, because these splits are where new branches come in. You can kind of see it a little more pronounced right here. So if you cut right above this, you turn one tall stalk into where it can branch off into two. And especially if you cut them down low, you're essentially going to make your plant just a lot bushier. And this is harvesting and pruning all in one. It smells like summertime. So you may have seen me in that little video trimming some of the stems off. This is lettuce leaf basil, and it has some really large stems. So as I cut, you know, and had big sections of stem, I just pulled them off because I just really want to dry the leaves. All right, let me come over here. I've got a whole bunch more basil over here, and I'm just going to do the very same thing. I am combining all of these culinary varieties. So this is like a Genovese, a sweet Italian, the purple opal, and the lettuce leaf. I'm just putting those all together. Alright, that's filling my basket. I do have some more plants down here on the end, and I'm just going to hold off on them and see if this fills my freeze dryer. I may just come and make a pesto or something out of these, but I'm just going to leave them on the plant right now. So between pickling those eggplants, probably using some of them for dinner, figuring out what I'm gonna do with the squash. Ooh, I just saw something. I did not know these were down here. What kind of pepper is this? I really failed with the labeling this year. I'm not sure what this is. That's a poblano. Nice. When I make a big harvest like this, I like to kind of generally imagine, goodness, my hair, how much it would cost me to purchase this at the grocery store. And when you imagine like one of those little blister packs of fresh basil is like $3. With that being the case, I mean, this is well over $100 worth of basil measured that way. You know, once I dry it and crumble it up and put it in a jar, it'll be significantly less pricey to buy something similar. But all of the cucumbers, I mean, you got to think, of course I've got to put more time and effort into it, some more ingredients. But once I make the jars of pickles, these are 100% organic jars of food. Never had a lick of any sort of chemical pesticide or fertilizer given to them, grown in healthy, rich, organic soil. I mean, this food is life. All this squash, all these eggplants. And though I absolutely feel like the garden is worth doing, even when something goes awry and the harvest doesn't come in. I like to really focus on all the things the garden offers, like physical fitness and mental well-being and a hobby and a passion and excitement. Obviously, our primary motivation is to feed our family when it comes to growing stuff like this. And being able to take really hundreds of dollars worth of purely organic food, knowing I really couldn't buy comparable things at the grocery store, and then take it into my kitchen and transform it into sustenance for my family. It's amazing, and I love being able to share this with you guys. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I am going to be putting videos of some of the different processes that I'm doing over on my cooking channel, The Farmer's Table. I'll put a link to it down below. And then I'm planning on, if the weather agrees, to shoot a garden tour this evening and show y'all a little more up close look at what all's going on in the garden. Thank you for hanging out with me. I bless you. Until next time.